Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mr. Gabriel's Auto Talk, and I'm your host, Ranger Bob. What we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be going over navigation systems. And of course, I know you guys, you know how to use navigation, but what you probably don't understand or know is how it really does work, and who came up with it, and where did we come from, and where are we going, where are we headed to. And so that's what we're going to be doing this week. And so a lot of you guys, you probably really don't even understand how the interstate highway system works. So that's really where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the basics on how the interstate system works. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about that, so that I'm not going to go into real detail about it, but enough that if you were traveling down interstate, you'd know some of what that stuff means. Like, what does that mile marker mean? And how do you know why does I-90 run this way and I-75 runs this way? So we're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a minute. So, hey guys, I kind of wanted to show you what I've been working on here at the house. And so, of course, you guys know that I've done restoration work for years and owned a business doing it. And that's what we were doing with our 68 Chevy C10 truck. And so where I'm at right now on this 69 Chevelle is where you guys would be on our truck. So let me show you a little bit. So here's what we got. So this week I managed to get the ribbon cable down on the bottom, and of course the whole back end of the car is all wired into the trunk, all my lights, my fuel sending unit, license plate light and everything. So I was able to get the back seat in, the carpet in, of course. And so I just got done restoring the instrument cluster, and I've got all of my harness laid in here and everything marked, so I know exactly where it goes. That's really what I wanted to teach you guys, is how to be organized and bag things up, write down what they are. Of course, I have all of my ends marked exactly what they are, so to me it's just a quick plug and play. I got the dash pad installed. And of course, once we put the instrument cluster in, it's going to go pretty fast. And then of course, we'll do the wiring out underneath the hood. But where I'm at right now on this Chevelle is where you guys should be on our C10 truck, had we not had all this happen to us with this outbreak, and of course us not being able to finish school. So anyway, I'm sorry about that, guys. I really was looking forward to finishing our truck up, at least the first stage of it, and moving on to, greater things in the years to come. Anyway, this is my instrument cluster. Of course, it's all original except for just the black part of the plastic housing. I pulled the lens out, polished it out, cleaned up all the gauges, and so we're going to be ready to put this in. We got him a new stereo to put in there, and of course it's all modern. It's Bluetooth, but it has the old school push button feel, so it'll be really nice. So okay, so let's talk about navigation systems. And so what I want to do is I want to go backwards. See this map? This is how we got around. Of course, for millennials, they've grown up with navigation and GPS systems. In 2000, the United States made GPS available to the public, made it more accurate anyhow. And so if you think about that, that hasn't been that long ago, 20 years ago, which to you guys is a long time for us, but us old people, we had these maps in our glove box. This is what we used to get around with, were these maps. And of course, you could have a whole atlas that was full of every state, or, if you only traveled state to state, then you might have something like this. And of course, all this stuff was to scale. People made a living out of making these maps, and all the highways were marked, and the interstates and the roads and the towns. And of course, you would have here it even has the radio station guide, tell you what radio stations were out there for these states. And so these were really neat. They really were. There was a ton of information in this. Of course, you guys are from the generation, you're used to having all of that just at your fingertips. And so it's way different. But what I want you to understand is, where did we come from? Like, let's go back a little bit and let's talk about the interstate systems. And so how did that come about? So here's what we're going to be covering this week. For one, how does it work? How do the interstate systems work? Because we got to start there. If we're going to talk about navigation systems, you first need to understand how interstates even came about in the first place. And so where are we headed to with advancing GPS systems? And do you understand that GPS stands for Global Positioning System? You need to understand how highways work. What do them numbers mean? Is there any rhyme or reason to it? Who came up with the interstate system? And it really wasn't until 2007 that navigation systems became mainstream. And what I mean by mainstream is that it wasn't just a gadget for people that like that stuff. It was actually the hottest selling item for 2007, that Christmas year. People were buying Garmin units, and people had them for stuffing stalkers, and it just really became mainstream. So that really hasn't been all that long ago. So since we're going to be talking about navigation systems this week, and of course we're going to go much deeper into it, I'm going to explain to you what the Air Force, Lockheed Martin, SpaceX, what all that has in common. And of course we're going to cover that a little further this week. But let's just start with the basics. Let's start with, and I'm not going to break out a map and teach you how to use a map, because you'll never probably ever use one of these, but I want you to understand where we came from. Also, I'm going to have a video for you tomorrow why it's so important. Like, what would just happen if the GPS satellites went down? And that's a possibility. It is very much a possibility, because you got to realize that when, like, SpaceX and all these other countries, not just over here, but other countries as well, we keep launching all these satellites into orbit, right? And so these satellites have a life expectancy of about 10 to 12 years. That's about how long they expect them to last. And when they go out, when they lose power, they lose battery power, we can't control them anymore. We can't move them. We can't bring them back. We can't work on them. All that stuff's just floating around out there, and it's known as space junk. We've got like tons and tons of space junk floating around there. And even something as small as a bolt traveling at that speed can have a heck of an impact if it hits something. So it's a very it's a problem that's very inevitable. It's probably going to happen. And of course, they do what they can to eliminate it. I mean, I don't know exactly how many satellites we have up there now, but I know originally the Department of Defense had 24 satellites. And of course, Lockheed Martin and SpaceX, they've got more of them that they're replacing these with. And of course, even Elon Musk is talking about launching like 60 satellites. So of course, they have to get approval to launch them. But with all this stuff getting launched out there and getting put into our orbital system, the likelihood of something getting hit is pretty great. And so I've got a video that would show you what exactly would happen if you were to lose GPS signals, if GPS signals went down. Because to understand them, you've got to understand why they use atomic clocks, what is an atomic clock, and why it's so imperative that the atomic clocks are as close to being 100% accurate as they can be. And so we're going to talk about why there's 4 atomic clocks in there. And so that's what we're going to be doing this week. But for today, we're just going to be talking about interstate systems. So I'm going to have you a short video after my video, explain this a little bit better, a little bit faster. But I put this down on some paper to make it easy for you to understand without getting too sidetracked. So why are the interstate systems numbered the way they are? Okay, well, let's talk about that. So odd interstate numbers, and when I say odd, I mean like I-5, I-35, I-95. That's 5's an odd number. That's what I'm talking about. So odd interstate numbers run north to south. So they'll begin over on the west coast, let's say California. So California, being west coast, is going to have Interstate 5. Interstate 5 runs, north to south, right? So now in Central Texas, for us here, we have I-35. Of course, you guys are familiar with that. And so I-35 runs south to north. So we got I-5, I-35. Well, guess what? Florida, being far east coast, they've got I-95, of course, running south to north. So you've got your odd numbers, I-5, I-35, I-95. And of course, there's other interstates in between. I'm just showing you West Coast, Central, East Coast. So that's how the odd interstates run. Now, let's talk about even interstate numbers. So if we talk about even interstate numbers, they run, of course, they're going to be running this way, right? We're going to be running west to east. And we're going to start down at the bottom of the U.S. So, of course, Texas. Let's say San Antonio and Houston, right? So San Antonio and Houston, going through that area, we've got I-10. Of course, 10, that's an even number, right? So let's jump up to Kansas, just the middle of the U.S. Kansas has I-70. And if you notice, if you see, up here in far north of the U.S., South Dakota, around Sioux City, I think, you got I-90. So if you look, see, we're going 10, 70, 90. So we're going from south to north, and we're going up with our numbers. And then, like I said over here, you've got your odd interstates that run north and south. And, of course, they go from, like I said, west coast to east coast. So odd numbers are up and down. Even numbers are side to side. And that pretty much explains it. I mean, now granted, there's other interstates in between, but if you were driving down an interstate, you would have an idea of, one, what direction you're traveling, and if you pay attention to mile markers, now you know which way you're going. Okay, what are mile markers? Well, let's talk about mile markers a minute. Okay, so the Interstate Highway System uses mile markers to do two things. One, they determine where you're at and what direction you're going. So in other words, if you had trouble out on the interstate, if you needed to call somebody, you could say, hey, I'm just past mile marker 111. Well, of course, somebody could find you that way because, for one, they got pretty much an idea where you're at in the state, which I'll explain that in a minute. They got an idea where you're at in the state, but if they were traveling down the same interstate that you're on, they can go, hey, I just crossed mile marker 100. I'm only about 11 miles away from you. They know. So let's talk about the mile markers. So now I wouldn't say always. I don't ever say always, but this is the way they're supposed to work, and they should work. Your mile markers are going to start at your state line. So if your interstate is running south to north, remember we talked about that, that's going to be your odd numbers, like let's just say I-35, okay? So you're on I-35 and you're on mile marker, let's say, I don't know, mile marker 2. Okay, well, you got to be right down at the coast because you're at the start of it. Now, if you were on mile marker, and I use 10 as an example, let's say you're on mile marker 300, okay? Well, you're 300 miles from the state border is where you're at. Now, if you were traveling on, let's go back over here. Let's say you're on I-10. Let's say you're down around the Houston area, you're on I-10, and you passed a mile marker 50. And then you drove a little further and you saw that you were at mile marker 60, okay? Well, for one, that tells you that you're traveling east. The reason why I know that is because we start the mile markers at the state line on the west side of the state. So over on this side, if you were driving, of course, you could look at your number and you're going to know which way you're traveling. You're going to know if you're traveling east or if you're traveling back west. If you see your mile marker numbers going down, then you know you're going west. If you see your mile markers going up, now you know you're going east. So all of this stuff like this, it's pretty simple and basic once you understand it. And if you ever have a GPS problem that goes down or you can't get on your phone or you can't access it, this just might save you from getting lost. For one, knowing if you're traveling north to south or traveling east to west, and how far in the state am I? If you were traveling through Oklahoma and it was dark and maybe you didn't pay attention, you nodded off or something, now at least you got an idea how far you traveled and how much further you got to go till you get out of the state, say into Kansas. So this is just basic stuff, but it's good to know that for people that don't understand it. And so hopefully this cleared a little bit of this up for you today. And of course, like I said, we're going to get way deeper in this week. This is just the basics right here. But the other thing I got for you too, I want to take you over here and show you something for a minute. So this week, we're going to do something a little bit different. What I did was I actually purchased 6 new Hot Wheels. And what's neat about it is we're going to unpackage these on Thursday, and we're going to get ready to run the race. I've got a late model Camaro, a late model Mustang. We're going to run a late model Alpine, Audi. We got a little Mini Cooper, and we got a Porsche. So I think that'd be a pretty good race. To me, we got the best of the American cars, and we pretty much got the best of a lot of the foreign cars outside of a Ferrari or something like that. But anyway, I thought that that would be kind of neat for us to do. And anyway, so I hope that you learned a little bit of something today. And like I said, we're going to dive way deeper into navigation systems. And so I think it'll be pretty fun. I think we'll all learn a little bit of something. Maybe you didn't know the Air Force controls those and they monitor that. Maybe you didn't know that Dwight Eisenhower kind of started the system. So there's going to be a whole lot to learn this week. And so I kind of look forward to learning with you guys. So y'all have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.